Nothing you meet is random. It's all connected.
What if your entire life until now was just research?
For decades, you've been running, chasing titles, chasing love, chasing purpose, believing that this was life. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He said, life really begins at 40, not as a metaphor, as a psychological fact. The first 40 years, merely preparation. Every success, every failure, every mask you wore was just data. Data your soul was quietly collecting. And now, as the shadows stretch longer across your days, a whisper begins to echo inside you. This isn't who I really am. Is it? He, the one everyone respected. She, the one who always smiled. You, the one who thought you knew what life was. They all begin to unravel. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Because something ancient is stirring beneath your persona. And it's not here to destroy who you've been. It's here to awaken who you truly are. And once you hear that call, you can't go back to sleep. What if the crisis they warned you about was actually your soul waking up? They call it midlife panic. You start questioning your choices. Your job feels hollow. The mirror seems to lie. The people around you, even the ones you love, no longer feel close. But Carl Jung didn't see it as a collapse. He saw it as a summons. Because when the roles you've played no longer fit, it's not dysfunction, it's initiation. It's the moment your deeper self, the one you buried beneath years of pleasing, striving, surviving, finally knocks on the door.
And you feel it, don't you?
Not as chaos, but as a strange silence, a pull, a haunting, something ancient inside you whispering, wake up.
It's not the end, it's the moment the false layers begin to peel. Not to leave you empty, but to reveal something frighteningly real underneath. You.
What if every success you chased was never really yours? The job, the titles, the family portraits, you built them, you wore them like armor, and the world applauded. But Jung whispered something few dared to hear. None of it was the story yet, it was only the prologue. For the first 40 years you were gathering pieces, beliefs from your parents, dreams from your culture, definitions of happiness that were handed to you, not chosen. You were learning how the world works, but not yet how you work. You shaped identities, roles, careers. But in that rush to become someone, something subtle was sacrificed, the one behind the mask. Now, in quiet moments, you sense it. A dissonance, a split. The you who succeeds and the you who watches silently from within, asking, is this all there is? That question isn't failure. It's a doorway. And once it opens, the true journey, your journey, finally begins.
What if everything you called urgency was never truly yours?
For years, he chased it. The promotion, the approval, the carefully checked boxes. She did too. So did you. Not because you truly wanted it, but because the world told you you should. We are taught to climb ladders, to fit molds, to perform. But around 40, something cracks. The goals that once pulled you like gravity start losing their weight. And in that strange weightlessness, an uncomfortable truth begins to emerge. Much of what you've pursued was borrowed. Borrowed definitions of success, borrowed dreams, borrowed values. Carl Jung didn't call this failure. He called it the beginning of individuation, the sacred unraveling of who you thought you had to become who you really are. And when that unraveling begins, it's subtle at first, a quiet ache, a voice saying, "This life doesn't fit me anymore." You hear it, not in your ears, but in your bones. What if the roles you mastered are now the very cages you must escape? He played the provider. She played the peacemaker. Maybe you became the achiever, the fixer, the one who always smiled. But somewhere in that performance, the real self was left behind. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask you crafted to survive, to succeed, to be seen. But a mask, no matter how refined, is still a mask. And eventually, it starts to crack. At 40, those cracks no longer hide. The job title doesn't feel like purpose. The social circle feels distant. The mirror reflects someone who looks like you but doesn't feel like you. You begin to wonder, was I building a life or a script? The persona served its purpose. It helped you belong, but now it begins to suffocate. And in that quiet suffocation, a question rises, and one that doesn't scream but lingers. Who am I when no one is watching? The answer isn't out there. It's buried somewhere inside, waiting. What if the parts of you you've buried have been watching from the dark? Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not evil, not monstrous, but unseen. It's the version of you that you silenced to survive. The anger you swallowed, the desire you denied, the fear you dressed up as ambition. And now, because as the persona weakens, the shadow begins to stir. It doesn't knock politely, it leaks in restlessness, in quiet resentment, in the strange ache you feel when everything is fine. But something feels wrong. He thought he was just tired. She thought she was just ungrateful. Maybe you've blamed stress, timing, others. But beneath it all is something far older, a self you left behind. The shadow isn't here to haunt you, it's here to be seen, to be heard. Not so you become it, but so you stop being ruled by what you refuse to face.
Only when you enter the dark can you find what was hiding in your light.
What if the thing you fear most is not outside you, but buried within? He had always been composed, rational, kind, respected. But then came the dreams. Not of monsters, but of mirrors. And in those mirrors, he didn't see a stranger. He saw the parts of himself he tried to forget. Carl Jung believed true transformation begins when you stop running and turn toward the shadow, not to fight it, but to listen. The shadow holds your shame, your jealousy, the truth you couldn't admit, and yet it also holds your buried gifts, your instincts, your passion, your forgotten voice. You were taught to silence it, but now midlife invites you to meet it.
It won't be loud, it arrives in quiet moments. A word you almost said, a truth you almost faced.
This is not the breakdown. This is the beginning of integration. You are not falling apart. You are finally being asked to come together, fully, honestly, painfully, beautifully. What if the emptiness you feel isn't a void, but a doorway? He began waking up in the middle of the night. Not from fear, but from feeling nothing at all. No thrill in success, no comfort in routine, just a stillness, too deep to ignore. But Carl Jung would say, this isn't numbness. It's the silence that comes before meaning. Because once you've stripped away the roles, the masks, the noise, you meet the raw self, and it doesn't shout. It waits.
Midlife, then, isn't a crisis. It's a recalibration. A moment when your soul begins to speak in a language the world forgot. Authenticity.
You may not know what you want yet, but you've begun to know what you no longer need, and that is power. When everything external starts to blur, you're being called inward, not to escape the world, but to finally live in your own alignment with it. You don't need more goals, you need more truth.
What if the version of you that's been silent suddenly stood up and spoke? It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it rises.
Not as rebellion, but as recognition, a truth long buried beneath duty, performance, and fear begins to move. He started saying no, quietly but finally. She stopped apologizing for the space she took up. And you begin making choices that don't make sense to others, but make sense to your soul. This is the turning point Jung spoke of, when individuation moves from theory to action. You don't just see the mask, you lay it down, not to destroy who you were, but to include who you've always been. It feels strange, unstable, liberating. You no longer ask, what do they want from me? You begin asking, what do I want from this life before it's over? And for the first time, you're not performing the answer. You're living it. What if the life you've built can no longer hold the person you're becoming? He didn't quit everything. He just stopped lying with his time, his words, his presence. She didn't run away. She simply stayed where she finally felt real. And you start moving differently, not to escape, but to align. This is what Jung called living from the self. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it is irreversible. The roles still exist, the job, the relationships, the expectations, but something fundamental has shifted. You're no longer performing them, you're inhabiting them, or choosing to release them. You begin to speak less, but mean more. You listen differently. You look at your reflection and see someone who's not trying to become anymore, but someone who has begun to return. And that return is not to who you were, it's to who you've always been before the world told you to forget.
What if the moment you've feared your whole life, the unraveling, is exactly what sets you free?
He didn't scream, he didn't collapse, he simply stopped pretending. She stood in the kitchen one morning and whispered, I don't want this version of me anymore.
And you're starting to sense it too, aren't you?
That the death of the old self isn't violent, it's quiet, a dissolving. The dreams begin to shift, the voice inside gets clearer, and the world no longer feels like something you must win, but something you can finally meet as you are. You thought transformation would be fire, but sometimes it's water, washing away everything you were told to be.
And now you're not watching his story, you're watching yours.
So let me ask you, what part of you has been waiting for the version of you that never arrived? And if that version never comes, will you finally show up? What if you were never broken, just unfinished? He no longer chased light. He turned and faced the dark, and found himself there, waiting. She no longer asked for permission. She listened, finally, to the voice that never left.
And you've heard that voice too, quiet, persistent, yours.
This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering someone ancient, the self behind the striving, the soul beneath the story. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But maybe that terror is sacred, because beyond it, there's nothing left to pretend, only the silence of truth and the strange peace of standing still, without shame. So now I ask you, not him, not her, you, what have you been running from that was always inside you? And if you stopped right now, not to give up, but to come home, what would you finally feel? What if the you you're becoming has already been watching you for years? He used to wonder when it would begin, the real life, the deeper truth, the calm. But now he understands. It never begins with answers. It begins with surrender. She no longer looks for signs, she listens for what's already inside. And you've made it this far, you've questioned, you've turned inward, you've faced silence, shadow, story. But here's the part no one prepares you for. The self you find is not always what you hoped for. It's not perfect, it's not polished, it's real.
And real is more than enough.
So the question isn't, who will you become? The question is, will you stay when you finally meet the truth of who you already are? Because maybe the most sacred journey was never forward. Maybe it was inward all along. What if the real transformation makes no sound at all? No fireworks, no grand revelations, just a shift so deep even the bones recognize it. He didn't announce it. He just woke up one morning and didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. She didn't post about it. She simply stopped apologizing for being whole.
And you start noticing small things.
You speak slower, you say no faster, you walk into a room and no longer scan for approval because you're already rooted in something deeper than performance. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not a better version, a truer one. The one who no longer seeks the light because they've become it, quietly, softly, without asking for permission. And maybe the most radical act in a world addicted to masks, to live unmasked and never look back.
What if this is not the end of the story, but the first time you're ready to live it?
He no longer searches for purpose. He becomes it, in silence, in presence, in the way he walks through a room without armor. She no longer carries the weight of proving she's enough. She simply is, and that is more than enough.
And you've come far.
Not forward, but inward. Not higher, but deeper. Not louder, but truer. So now, no more chasing, no more becoming, no more pretending. Just this.
You here, now, real.
And maybe that, after all the masks, the mirrors, the myths, was the only thing you ever truly needed.
If this stirred something within you, maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. The journey inward begins in silence. Follow the signs, stay aware, and remember, the self is always watching.